And for a reaction on all of this tonight, we're going to bring in our State House insiders, Antoine Seawright, our Democratic strategist, Dave Wilson, our Republican strategist tonight. And Dave, I know the Senate has been talking about some sort of bill as well when it comes to liquor liability insurance. What are the chances that the House measure passes over in the Senate?
I think the House is going to get that taken care of. Will the Senate take that bill up? The Senate has been working this entire week on this tort reform insurance liquor liability bill. They've got a whole at least one more week, possibly two. This is going to be taking up the most oxygen in the room when it comes to what the Senate's going to be doing. Are they going to take up the House version of it? Probably not. It's probably going to be sending their version back over to the House, and it's probably going to end up somewhere in a conference committee before we get to the end of session.
I think these things often turn into political tic-tac-toe, a little back and forth, or a political seesaw, if you will. And I think this legislation is going to be no different. I know this has been heavy conversation. There's been a lot of ads on both sides, a lot of accusations on both sides of who is for and who's against, and the reason they should be and should not. At the end of the day, I'm not sure that this is so much of a priority in the state of South Carolina that it's going to change the lives of everyday people. Not saying it is not a priority, but I'm not certain it's the top priority that's going to impact everyday South Carolinians' quality of life. Now, with every bit of legislation that usually comes as a result of some sort of scenario or need, I'm sure there have been multiple needs for this. That's why this debate will continue to be interesting.
The biggest part of the need on that right now is the fact that you've got bars and restaurants whose insurance rates have skyrocketed. They've gone through the roof, and that has meant that some bars and some restaurants have actually had to shut down. There's a restaurant in Spartanburg. There were two restaurants. The owner said, basically, my insurance rates went up 10 times what it was before, and I had to shut one of them down. You've got places that are bars here in the Columbia area that had to shut down because they couldn't afford it. And so this is what's impacting small business, and insurance rates are really skyrocketing and going through the roof, and they're demanding that something be done on this to counter what the insurance companies are doing to them.
But David, all I'm saying in this regard is, if in fact this is definitely a priority for some, but if this means whether or not someone has to pay the light bill or choose their medication, or whether or not kids are funded in South Carolina public schools and teacher pay and government employees getting what they deserve, again, I don't know if this is top priority, but it is a priority.
Yeah, because it's what actually does the funding of all of those things. And when businesses shut down and people don't have jobs, to Antoine's point, those things don't get covered.
All right, so you're talking about who's going to get what when it comes to the budget this year. I know budget talks are going to heat up here pretty soon over at the State House, correct, Antoine?
That's correct. Look for the House to start the budget process, I think, as early as next week. Show me your budget. I'll show you what you value. So Republicans control all branches of government in our state. They have a supermajority both in the House and the Senate. So we're going to see what their priorities are. We're certainly going to see what the response is in South Carolina to what you see happening on the national level, with Republicans trying to cut into the bone of government as we know it.
I don't necessarily think we're going to be cutting to the bone, because we actually have a surplus this year. The question is going to be, will we continue to see a tax decrease for the average person? And so that's money back in your pocket, because remember, we were at a 7% tax rate just a few years ago. We've been dropping that down considerably, trying to get to 6, so that you are actually taking home more money. So folks at home, that's what this means to you. So how much will be funding government, and how much may or may not be coming back to you?
I know the governor has laid out his budget request already, asking for more money to attract and keep more teachers in the state of South Carolina, more money for the state corrections department, and more money to create more jobs in the state of South Carolina. Antoine, you say Republicans are going to get what Republicans want when it comes to the budget. Do you think the governor is going to get everything he wants this year?
I certainly know that South Carolina is a heavy legislative state, and so the governor often does not get what the governor wants. But I do think Governor McMaster's priorities do overlap with, I think, the needs of South Carolina. As the younger brother of an educator, my sister's a high school principal, I know the need for increased teacher pay and recruiting and retaining good teachers into our system. And as someone who grew up in rural South Carolina and still lives in rural South Carolina, grew up in Swansea, live in Lower Richland, I do know that jobs and economic development are key key to helping rural communities flow and rural communities flow. I think South Carolina goes. And so I think that's going to be important. I also know funding governmental agencies that have traditionally been left out and left behind are a priority. So South Carolina Republicans have a big list to consider and categorize what their priorities are.
And the governor has made that abundantly clear. And to Antoine's point, we have gone from seeing starting teacher pay in the mid to upper 30s. The governor has proposed the starting teacher pay at $50,000 a year. And that is a significant Republican call and push towards what needed to be done, because remember, we were losing teachers, and we were having discussions about that not that long ago, how we were having a massive teacher shortage, and seeing a level of increase that brings us above the Southeastern average is going to be a really important step forward that our state government needs to fund if we're going to see that level of growth continue to happen.
My only pushback to my dear friend Dave is that you have Republicans who want to take South Carolina taxpayers' dollars and not fully fund public education, and yet they want to put it towards private schools. Another discussion for another day, but I think the people at home should know that.
All right, Antoine and Dave, as always, guys, thank you so very much. We're going to take a quick break.